Hey crew, it's Ben, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we're going to be diving back into Numbers, but before we begin, if you're unfamiliar with what I am doing here, I'm holding an unconventional Bible study. We are reading the book, but we are doing it through a different lens than you're probably used to seeing. If you're unfamiliar with what I am doing, I suggest you start in Genesis, but you are more than welcome to tag along. With that being said, I do have a tendency to step on some toes. It's not intentional. I don't mean to offend anybody, but sometimes the truth hurts, but the truth will set you free. And so, we are going to dive back into Numbers 31. We have just gotten done with the distraction of here's some monotony of the law, right? There was a plague that came upon the camp of spears, like a plague of spears came and killed 24,000 people before it was halted. And so there was a little bit of a breather room right there. And now we're going to be diving back into the scriptures and we're dealing with Numbers. Let me make sure I transferred that right. All right. But before we do, we are going to dive back in and look at the geography just to refresh ourselves, show ourselves what we're talking about now. We have seen in the book of Numbers that the Israelites have conquered the land to the east of the Jordan across from the Jericho and part of the land down here. They have pretty much control of this area called Ammon right now. There are still Ammonites up here. There are Moabites directly to the south of the Israelites. The Canaanites and several other tribes are west of the Jordan. We are east of the Jordan. And the Moabites are directly south of that. Now, to the west of the Moabites are the Edomites. The Edomites control the Negev and that area of the desert there. The Moabites, the desert to the west or to the east of the Dead Sea. South of the Moabites, we have the Midianites. The Midianites control this area of land just to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba. There is a mountain range right up in here. You can see the difference in shading. That's a mountain range. We're not going to break it down and look at it right now, but that's where Jebel al-Oz is, where a lot of people believe Mount Sinai is. Directly south of that is where I believe Mount Sinai is. And I believe that the Desert of Sin is this orange desert off to the right. But the Midianites control this tannish color right here, and this is their land. There are 5 kings that rule this area, and it is on the other side of the Moabites and the Edomites from where the Israelites are currently living. Now, let's dive into Numbers. We left off in Numbers 30, so we're going to pick back up in Numbers 31. And the Lord said to Moses, take vengeance on the Midianites for the Israelites, and after that you will be gathered to your people. Already we have a problem, because if you've been following along, the Midianites have not done anything wrong. The Midianites have not led astray. The Midianites have merely assisted. They have not done anything to anger God or to anger the Israelites. The Midianites have, when we started out, right, in Exodus, Moses was living with his father-in-law Jethro in Midian. He left from there, he went to Egypt, he retrieved the Israelis, and he comes back to Midian. And from there, he goes to Sinai, and from there he goes up and he conquers the land where he's at now, after being denied passage from the Edomites and the Moabites. He goes around above them and conquers the land there. Takes out the land of Og, the people and the generations of Og. But the Midianites haven't done anything. That's a problem. And here's where the apologetics come in, right? They're like, well, they really meant. Well, if they really meant Moab, they would have said Moab. They didn't really mean Moab. They meant Midian. And the Midianites, while they haven't done anything wrong, are competition in something else. Because when Moses left Midian, he was able to perform some miracles. And I believe that those miracles were predicated on technology that we don't have, right? I'm not saying that I know how to do these things, but there was something that was known to the priesthoods of several different places. One of them was Egypt. There is a whole tradition of Egyptian learning that you can dive into. Like, there's a lot of good knowledge there. There's a whole trail of Babylonian knowledge that you can dive into. Well, there was a whole thing of Midianite knowledge that was the same as the knowledge from Egypt in Ramses and the knowledge from Babylon. Like, it's the same knowledge that was purported by different priests. And the people of Midian had it, but the people of Moab did not. And so before they go to war, Moses told the people, arm some of your men for war, that they may go against the Midianites and execute the Lord's vengeance on them. Send into battle 1,000 men from each tribe of Israel. A 12,000 man fighting force is a lot of people. If you are unaware of, like, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people under arms to take over. But you're attacking an entire country here, and that's something impressive too. So that they may go against the Midianites and execute the Lord's vengeance on them. Send into battle 1,000 men from each tribe of Israel. So 1,000 men were recruited from each tribe of Israel, 12,000 armed for war. And Moses sent the 1,000 from each tribe into battle, along with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, who took with him the vessels of the sanctuary and the trumpets for signaling. And then they waged war against Midian, as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they killed every male. Among the slain were Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, son with the sword. If you remember from a couple chapters back, we dealt with Balaam, son of Beor. He was somebody who was called down to cast a curse on Israel. He was called down, and the king of Moab tried to bribe him. The king of Moab summoned this man from the Euphrates, the land of his fathers, way back up by Babylon. And he summons him down, and he says, curse these people. They go up to the high places and they give the sacrifice, and God appears. And God says no. And this priest, this prophet says, no, I will not cast a curse. And he does this 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he not only doesn't curse them, but he tells Moab that they got bad stuff coming. Right? That's a quick summary that we went over a few chapters ago. They killed Balaam, son of Beor, the man who, on God's direction, refused to curse Israel. Because those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. And what happened to the one here that blessed Israel? In the same book, just a couple chapters back, this is on the same scroll. What happened to the man who blessed Israel right here? Before Israel even comes into its land, he still blesses them and says that they will have the land and that it will multiply and it will be their possession. And what happened to him? They killed him. Now, why would they kill him? He was not involved. This isn't even the land that he was summoned to, so we have a little bit of an explanation needed here. We don't get it. We don't get that explanation at all, not in this scroll. In this scroll, they kill somebody who was doing God's service, somebody that God appeared to. Competition for Moses, that's who they killed. They went down to where there was competition, and they killed the competition. That's what's happening right here. And you can say whatever, but Midian didn't betray them. Midian guided them through the wilderness, showed them the way around Moab, and helped them to take over the land that they're in possession of. And what happened? This zealot priest takes the vessels and they go down to make war. And it's significant that they take these vessels, even though they don't tell us what's happening. We're going to go over that, so stick around. And then they waged war against Midian as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they killed every male. Among the slain were Evi, Rakim, Zor, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. The Israelites captured the Midianite women and their children, and they plundered all their herds, flocks, and goods. Then they burned all the cities where the Midianites had lived, as well as all their encampments, and carried away all the plunders and spoils, both people and animals. They brought the captive spoils and plunder to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of Israel at the camp on the plains of Moab, by the Jordan, across from Jericho. And Moses, Eleazar, and the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, who were returning from the battle. Have you spared all the women? He asked him. Look, these women caused the sons of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to turn unfaithfully against the Lord at Peor. We don't have that story. That is not the story that has been told. It's not. What happened was Balaam turned around the other people. He didn't turn around none of these. They went into the land of Canaan across the Jordan and saw what was over there and said that the stuff over there was too much for them. There were giants over there. They brought back a great cluster that they had to carry between 2 men. And we talked about that before, so we're not going to get into that again. And that's what happened there. That wasn't this. This is what's being reflected here, though. And then the women caused the sons of Israel. No, that was Moab. That was the people directly to the south of you. And you put an end to that curse. Like, you stopped that. 24,000 people died because of that. But you bypassed those people in your testament, written like this is the incontrovertible word, right? This is infallible. Nobody can touch it. So you said that you went to Midian and not to Moab, who you had a beef with. You had beef with Moab. Moab called Balaam down and said, cast a curse. And you said no. So Moab was trying to curse Israel, and they didn't get cursed. Balaam refused to curse Israel and instead blessed Israel, and he died. And then you bypass the country that cursed you and go down to the people who have helped you, and you destroy them. You kill every male, right? We're about to get back into that. And then you take away all of their women and children and livestock and possessions. And you carry it back around Moab, the people who cursed you, into the land that you have taken possession of, where you are wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. To turn unfaithfully against the Lord at Peor, so that the plague struck the congregation of the Lord. The plague. We stabbed y'all and called it some plague. So now, kill all the boys as well as every woman who has had relations with a man. But spare for yourselves every girl who has never had relations with a man. Said Moses, the faithful one who speaks God's will on the earth. You have taken these people hostage. You have killed all of their fighting men. But why do you bring their boys home? We don't need their boys. As a matter of fact, kill every woman that's old enough to menstruate. That's I'm sure they checked all the hymens, right? And so what you basically done was just kidnapped a single subsection of a population. You have the women children, or the girls, not even women, the girls. Because if they were old enough to be married off, they were getting married off. That's how it worked. Anybody that had relations with a man, they just wipe them out. And that's the establishment of the just society. The laws that we're supposed to follow come from that. Come on, bro. Come on, bro. Okay, but spare for yourselves every girl who has never had relations with a man. There's a whole different level of what the going on in that we're not even going to touch on. But you know what I'm talking about. And all of you have killed a person or touched the dead or remain outside of the camp for 7 days. And on the third day and the seventh day, you are to purify both yourselves and your captives, and purify every garment and leather good, everything made of goat's hair, and every article of wood. And then Eleazar the priest said to the soldiers who had gone into battle, This is the statute of the law, which the Lord hath commanded Moses. Only the gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead, everything that can withstand the fire, must be put through the fire, and it will be clean. But it still must be purified with the water of purification, and everything that cannot withstand the fire must pass through the water. On the seventh day you are to wash your clothes, and you will be clean. After that, you may enter the camp. We talked about the why of all of that already. The division of the spoils, and this is where numbers get interesting again, y'all. Like we talked before about the population that came out of Israel, and how it is very reasonable estimate that there was 3 million wandering through the desert. That 3 million are now living on the east side of the Jordan River. The Lord said to Moses, You and Eleazar the priest and the family heads of the congregation are to take account of what was captured, both of man and beast, and then divide the captives between the troops who went out to battle and the rest of the congregation. Set aside a tribute for the Lord from what belongs to the soldiers who went into battle, 1 out of every 500, whether persons, cattle, donkey, or sheep. Take from their half and give it to Eleazar the priest as an offering to the Lord. From the Israelites' half, take 1 out of every 50, whether persons, cattle, donkeys, sheep, or other animals, and give it to the Levites, who keep charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. And so Moses and Eleazar the priest did, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And this plunder remained from the spoils the soldiers had taken. 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, 32,000 women who had not slept with a man. Think about those numbers for a second, and that this was 12,000 men who went to war. So that is simply in herding that many people or sheep back and keeping control of these. Well, you don't have a hard time keeping control of 32,000 children, I guess. But for the 12,000 men, you got 32,000 children, so that's what? Not quite 3 per man to bring back. Not counting the sheep, not counting the cattle, not counting the donkeys, just in people. Each person is responsible for three people. And what, 4 donkeys? 5 cows? I'm not even going to do the math on the sheep, but you see where that's going, right? Like the division of labor coming back from this is astounding. Like, I'm not even going to say it's not possible. It's possible, but how did you get past Moab? Like, you've already done it once, though. You know where to go. You've already taken 3 million people with all of their possessions that they came out of Egypt with and significant livestock. You've already taken that around Moab. So now you know where to go. So you will go around Moab and back into the land. But this is a lot of animals. Like 675,000 sheep is a lot of sheep. Now, you're dealing with a lot of people, right? That's an even division of almost one sheep per man in Egypt, or that came out of Egypt. You're just over 602,000, I think, was the last census. So that's a lot. That's all I'm saying. It's like they brought a whole lot back because they destroyed an entire area. They went and waged destruction in Midian. Don't make no equivocations about that. If you're an apologist and you're somehow still watching, you can't equivocate. These were not the genetic problems that are coming up in Canaan, because there are arguments that can be made for that, like the giants being a real thing and killing them off. There's arguments that can be made for that particular set of atrocities, but not for this one. This one has no justification because it was not Midian according to this text where you are justifying it. There was not Midian, or it was not Midian that misled them. It was not Balaam who cast the curse. The people who died here were simply competition for the wonders, the vessels that went down. We're going to get to that here in just a minute. Let's run through these numbers. This is going to get a little boring. This was the half portion for those who had gone to war. 337,500 sheep, including a tribute to the Lord of 675. 36,000 cattle, including a tribute to the Lord of 72. 30,500 donkeys, including a tribute to the Lord of 61. 16,000 people, including a tribute to the Lord of 32. And Moses gave the tribute to Eleazar the priest as an offering for the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Not to the priesthood. They get their own separate issue of an equal value. This priest got that. This priest alone got 675 sheep, 72 cattle, 61 donkeys, and 32 people. It kind of makes you wonder if maybe the reason why Eleazar came down from the mountain and Aaron didn't had something to do with the situation that's going on right now. I tend to think so. And from the Israelites half, so the 12,000 men who went get half the spoils, which they pay a portion of, one out of every 500. And then the other half goes to the entirety of the nation to be settled in however it's done. And from the Israelites half, which Moses had set apart from the men who had gone to war, this half belonged to the congregation. 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. And from the Israelites half, Moses took one out of every 50 persons and animals and gave them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord had commanded him. And then the officers who were over the units of the army, the commanders of thousands and hundreds, approached Moses and said, "Your servants have counted the soldiers under our command, and not one of us is missing. So we have brought to the Lord an offering of the gold articles each man acquired, armlets, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord." I don't put anything out of the possibility of God. But it is highly, highly unlikely, highly unlikely that 12,000 men plus a priest went into an entire land and killed every man. Most of the women, took captive all of the rest to be killed later, destroyed their cities and all of this, and not one casualty was incurred. Not one. That is, on face value, an extreme testament of faith. But they didn't have that kind of faith. They're making atonement. They didn't think that was going to happen. They're making atonement. What happened was, pure speculation on my part, Eleazar went with them, with these vessels, and he used this weapon of destruction in the manner in which it was intended to be used. And therefore, he didn't have to kill nobody. Nobody had to die on the Israelite side. This is what they were talking about when they said that they would go and not have to conquer anything. Well, if that is the case, then they were given Midian. If it is the case that they are going to go in and not have to fight battles, they were given Midian. They defeated the 5 kings of Midian. Their holy mountain is right there. But instead, they have to go and fight for this God's place that he wants them to have, which is interesting. But let's look at this number again real quick, because 32,000 women, children, right? We're assuming from 5 to stretch it and say 13. So that age group is what is left from here. Well, if we double that for boys, we're looking at 64,000. If we double that again for the other half of teenage years, that's 124,000. That's just a reasonable estimate of children up to adulthood, not counting all the rest. So let's count all the rest. If we got 64,000, reasonable assumption, then a reasonable assumption is to double that so that you have a parent on each side. So you have half boys, half girls, even break 1 and 1 child for each parent. Then we're looking at 300,000 people. That 12,000 people went down to do battle with. The numbers can get really big really fast when you start making sense out of the numbers. For 12,000 people to go and do, even if they were only fighting a force equal to what they took in prisoners here, 32,000 women. And this is the ones that survived the cold, right? But even if that is all they were fighting against, they are fighting it over 2 to 1 odds. War is not simple. I don't put anything past God. I believe that he could have struck down the entire army facing the Israelites. I believe that. But that's not what he says happens here. These fighting men went and fought and nobody was injured or died. I do not believe that. That is one of those continuity problems that is a problem for me. It doesn't have to be for you. But it is a problem for me. All right. Let's do this. We're going to go to the tribes east of the Jordan because this is where they went and brought it back to, and this is proof of that, right? Let me tap off this water real quick. Now, the Reubenites and Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, surveyed the lands of Jazer and Gilead, and they saw that the region was suitable for livestock. So the Gadites and Reubenites came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of the congregation and said, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sabam, Nebo, and Beon, which the Lord conquered before the congregation of Israel, are suitable for livestock. And it just so happens, your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan. But Moses asked the Gadites and Reubenites, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here? Why are you discouraging the Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to inspect the land. For when your fathers went up into the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land that the Lord had given them. And so the anger of the Lord was kindled that day, and he swore an oath, saying, because they didn't follow me wholeheartedly, not one of the men 20 years of age or older who came out of Egypt will see the land that I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not one except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, Yeshua, son of Nun, because they did follow the Lord wholeheartedly. The anger of the Lord has burned against Israel, and he has made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And so the whole generation who had done evil in his sight was gone. We do not have the story of the wandering in Egypt. We have the story of them taking possession of this land. I think that this particular section is just to make us think that they did wander. Like, they did go through the desert. They did not have a spot for a while. But it was not 40 years. It was not. And Moses is in the land of Israel. The land that they are talking about right now is Israel. So that's a promise broken. Moses is in the land. He may not have crossed the Jordan, but he is in the land because this is the land now. God has given it to him. He just gave them Midian, but they didn't take it. And then the Gadites approached Moses and said, we want to build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones, but we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our little ones will remain in the fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every Israelite has taken possession of his inheritance. Yet, we will not have an inheritance with them across the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. And Moses replied, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for battle, and if every one of your armed men crosses the Jordan before the Lord, until he has driven his enemies out before him, then, when the land is subdued before the Lord, you may return and be free of obligation to the Lord and to Israel. And this land will belong to you as a possession before the Lord. But if you do not do this, you will certainly sin against the Lord. And be assured that your sin will find you out. Build cities for your little ones and folds for your flocks, but do what you have promised. And the Gadites and Reubenites said to Moses, your servants will do just as our Lord commands. Our children, our wives, our livestock, and all our animals will remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your servants are equipped for war, and every man will cross over to the battle before the Lord, just as our Lord says. Moses didn't go to God and ask him what he said about it. Moses said, all right, this is what it's going to be. And so Moses gave orders about them to Eleazar the priest, to Yeshua the son of Nun, and to the family leaders of the tribes of Israel. And Moses said to them, if the Gadites and Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, and every man armed for battle before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, then you are to give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they do not arm themselves and go across with you, then they must accept their possession among you in the land of Canaan. And the Gadites and Reubenites replied, as the Lord has spoken to your servants, so will we do. We will cross over into the land of Canaan armed before the Lord, that we may have our inheritance on this side of the Jordan. And so Moses gave to the Gadites, the Reubenites, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land including its territories and the territories surrounding them. And the Gadites built up Dibon, Ataroth Aor, Atroth Shophan, Jazer, Jogbehehi, Beth Nimrah, Beth Haran, as fortified cities, and they built folds for their flocks. The Reubenites built up Heshbon, Eliel, Kiriathaim, as well as Nebo and Baal-Meon, whose names were changed, and Sibmah, and they renamed the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead and captured it, and drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, the sons of Manasseh, and they settled there. Jair, a descendant of Manasseh, went and captured their villages, and called them Havoth Jair. And Nobah went and captured Kenath and its villages, and called it Nobah, after his own name. So, they have destroyed Midian, and they did not take possession of that land. Instead, they brought all of the possessions way up here, where they took possession of this. Now, they had previously conquered the area east of Jericho, the land of Bashan right here, which was where Og was. It killed him and all his descendants. This was the Ammonites, and they take a piece of that, and then this is the Gilead Valley, right? So they take this. They take possession of a large chunk east of the Jordan, and it becomes the land of Israel for a period of time. The entirety of Israel is living in this land that has now been given away to the Reubenites and the Gadites and part of Manasseh. That's this area. They are preparing for the conquest of the homeland, right? The land they were promised. And you can make the argument that Moses didn't step foot in Israel because Israel didn't contain this. But when they conquered the rest of Israel, this is still part of Israel. This is the beginning of Israel. This is Israel in the wilderness. This is their 40 years of desert. This is where they are when they're wandering for 40 years. They're not in their promised land yet, but they are in a conquered land. And they could have very well split off 3 or 4 tribes and sent them down here. They could have, at that point, taken Moab in a pincher maneuver and conquered this whole area right here. They could have, like, this part of wasn't really a thing. This is the salt evaporation. They're taking water from here and evaporating the salt. So they could have swept into Edom and pinchered from there and took over Edom, and then from there conquered their spot. That's not what they did. They took this area and then they conquered more around it and fortified themselves. You know how long it takes to fortify a city? Especially with the populations of these cities that we're talking about. Like, we're moving in thousands of people to take possession of a land. So first, they have to establish themselves, and then they can fortify their cities. Or maybe they did it the other way, and they fortified the cities, and then they established themselves. But either way, they have to do both. They have to fortify themselves, and we'll come back on the next one and probably wrap up from 33 to the end. That's dealing a lot with the dispersal of the land that they do not have yet, except for this one spot. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I know that I hold some very unconventional beliefs, and I bring light to some very unconventional things in this book. I know that that tends to step on toes. I never intend to step on toes. But I do not apologize for the toes that get stepped on. If you are in support of taking girls as a prisoner, I have no cut for you. None. The entirety of what we have seen is leading into the fact that the entirety of this, entirety is a big word, the foundations that other things are built from are rotten to the core. There are great deals of truth scattered in this book, but so far they have been slim, right? The pickings are slim since Genesis on truth. There are definitely useful things. There are definitely true things, but the entirety is not true. The entirety is an embellishment. It is something that the priests and the Levites made up to keep people in line. And they used Moses, whether or not he actually did the things he's accredited to, in a non-consistent manner throughout this. Like Moses came, like when he fled Egypt the first time, he went to Midian and he established a life there. He was working for his father-in-law. So he had a wife, they had kids, and he had a father-in-law that he got along with. And then he snuck away and he goes over to Egypt, and then he comes back with another wife. And then he receives assistance from Midian. And the Midianites allow him to pass through the land, and they go over to where I believe Sinai is, and we've talked about that extensively. And then the Midianites guide him. They help him to find out where he needs to camp. And then, in return, he destroys the entire country and takes their children as sex slaves. It's pretty rough. If that's okay with you, then we're not okay. We're achieving a new level of understanding. We're serving the God of creation. That is who I serve. I can serve God himself. But whenever men get involved, it gets messed up. When you get into doctrines, it gets messed up. When you start codifying the minutiae, it gets messed up because men want to establish their viewpoint on it. They want to put their spin on it. This was an extremely patriarchal society. This was extremely sexually permitted, right? We talked about the restrictions and how they had to put those into place because it was wild out there. And they only mildly modified that wildness. They took away sleeping with your own family, which thank God they did. We'd all have a third eye. Or they took away one side of homosexuality, but not the other for a reason. And they're okay with taking children. They're okay with it. And so the foundation is rotten. Moses is alive when they take these children hostage. He kills their moms. He's mad as hell. How dare you bring these children with their parents? And why did you bring boys at all? That's the patriarch we all need. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me. And I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.